The Secrets We Keep. Chapter 1. The Weight of Gold. Part 3 Final. The sound of shattering wood echoed through the dark corridors of the library, followed by the heavy thud of boots on the marble floor of the main hall. Eleanor's breath caught in her throat. She quickly blew out the oil lamp, plunging the study into complete darkness. Her heart hammered wildly against her ribs, loud enough that she feared the intruders might hear it. She scrambled to her feet, scooping up the bundle of letters and the photograph from the floor. She shoved them deep into the inner pocket of her blazer. "Check the eastern wing," a gruff, low voice echoed from the hallway. The old man kept the main safe in his study. "The boss wants whatever is inside before Sterling's demolition crew gets here on Monday." Sterling's demolition crew. Eleanor's mind raced. Monday. Richard Sterling had told her that the acquisition was still pending her signature. Why would he have a demolition crew ready on Monday unless he was absolutely certain she would sell, or unless he planned to force her hand? "Hurry it up," a second voice muttered, "closer this time." The beam of a high-powered flashlight swept across the corridor outside the study door. "If that London architect woman shows up tomorrow, we need to be long gone." Eleanor pressed her back flat against the wall beside the heavy oak door. She was unarmed, completely alone in a dead town, with two men breaking into her grandfather's study. Her phone was in her handbag, left on the reading table in the main hall. Panic, raw and cold, clawed at her throat. She squeezed her eyes shut, trying to tap into the cold, calculated logic she used in the boardroom. "Think, Eleanor. Think." The heavy footsteps reached the study door. The beam of a flashlight cut through the gap in the doorway. The door creaked open, pushed by a gloved hand. Before the intruder could step fully into the room, a loud, sharp whistle pierced the air from outside the study window, followed by a heavy splash of rain and a metallic clang as something heavy hit the iron gates of the library. "Hey! Who's out there?" the first intruder shouted, rushing back toward the main hall. "Leave the safe. Someone's outside," the second man yelled. Eleanor heard the frantic sound of boots running back toward the entrance, followed by the heavy thud of the front doors being thrown open. A moment later, a deep, familiar voice roared over the sound of the storm. "Get out of here before I break both your legs." It was Julian. There was a brief scuffle, the sickening sound of a fist hitting bone, and a sharp curse. Then, the frantic sound of a car engine revving up and tires screeching against the wet gravel echoed through the night. The intruders were fleeing. Silence fell once more, save for the relentless rain. "Eleanor." Julian's voice echoed through the empty library, loud and urgent. Eleanor slowly peeled herself off the wall. Her legs felt like lead as she walked out of the study and down the dark corridor toward the main hall. Julian was standing near the entrance, breathing heavily. His knuckles were bruised and bleeding slightly, and he was holding a heavy iron wrench in his right hand. When he saw Eleanor emerge from the darkness, visibly shaken but unharmed, he let out a long breath of relief. "Are you hurt?" he asked, stepping toward her, his voice devoid of the earlier hostility. "No," Eleanor whispered, wrapping her arms tightly around herself. "No, I'm fine." Why did you come back?" Julian tossed the wrench onto a nearby table. "My truck wouldn't start. The storm flooded the engine down the road. I was walking back to the harbor when I saw a black SUV parked with no lights on near the back entrance. I knew Arthur didn't have anything worth stealing left in here, unless it was something hidden. He looked at her closely. What were they looking for, Eleanor? Eleanor hesitated. Her hand instinctively pressed against her chest, where the letters lay heavy against her racing heart. They mentioned Richard Sterling, she said, her voice shaking slightly as the adrenaline began to fade. They said Sterling's demolition crew is coming on Monday. They were looking for a safe in my grandfather's study. Julian's eyes darkened with anger. Sterling! That arrogant bastard! He couldn't buy Arthur out, so now he's trying to strong-arm you before you even have a chance to figure out what this place is worth. He told me the acquisition was just standard procedure, Eleanor said, pacing the floor, her corporate mind finally kicking back into gear. He told the board the town of Oakridge was practically begging us to buy the land. He lied. To me. To the investors. He didn't want the library, Julian said grimly. He wanted whatever Arthur had hidden. Your grandfather was terrified in his final weeks, Eleanor. He kept muttering about old debts and a secret that could destroy Sterling's entire real estate empire if it got out. Eleanor stopped pacing. She looked at Julian, the defensive walls she had built around herself for 12 years slowly cracking. She reached into her blazer and pulled out the bundle of letters. The faded blue ribbon hung loosely from her fingers. My grandfather left me a key, she said quietly, holding out the letters. These are from my father. Written the week before he and my mother died. Julian looked at the letters, then up at Eleanor's pale face. He didn't say I told you so. He didn't show any trace of the anger they had shared just 20 minutes ago. Instead, he simply nodded. You need to read them, Julian said gently. But not here. It's not safe. If Sterling hired those men, they'll be back when they realize they didn't get what they came for. Where do we go? Eleanor asked, realizing for the first time in her adult life that she had no control over the situation. She was entirely out of her depth. My place, Julian said, picking up his coat. It's near the harbor. The roads are flooded anyway, you won't make it back to London tonight. Eleanor looked around the grand, shadowy library. The towering bookshelves, the intricate wood carvings, the smell of old paper. It suddenly didn't feel like a burden anymore. It felt like a fortress holding the last remaining fragments of a family she thought had abandoned her. She looked at her sleek leather briefcase sitting on the table, containing the legal documents that would sign the Starlight Library away to Richard Sterling. With a swift, decisive motion, Eleanor picked up the briefcase, opened it, pulled out the sale contract, and tore it in half. Julian watched her, a slow, faint smile pulling at the corner of his mouth. I guess the prodigal granddaughter isn't leaving just yet, he said softly. Eleanor met his gaze, her posture straightening, the sharp, brilliant architect replacing the frightened girl. Sterling thinks he can play me, Eleanor said, her voice cold and steady. He thinks I'm going to run away just because he sent 2 thugs in the dark. He clearly forgot who he taught how to be ruthless. She walked past Julian, pushing the heavy oak doors open into the storm. Let's go, she said over her shoulder. We have reading to do. End of chapter 1. YouTube outro cliffhanger note. What really happened to Eleanor's parents 29 years ago, and what secret is Richard Sterling desperate to bury beneath the rubble of the Starlight Library? Find out in Episode 2.